Welcome to Minukuu tutorials. In this third part of our tutorial on strings, vectors, and data frames, we will be looking at how to use the quotes or how to set the quotes argument as well as the stringsAsFactors arguments in read.table or read.csv function when reading data into R or importing data into R. So basically, like I said, this is actually the third part of our tutorial on strings, vectors, and data frames. So if you haven't yet watched the previous sessions, which has to do with the first part, actually covered how to write strings using the four major ways of writing strings, and then how to obtain character vectors from strings, how to combine character vectors and maybe numeric vectors or only character vectors to form data frames. We did all of that, and we finally also looked at how to convert character variables or string or if you want character strings within the data set to factors and vice versa, and how to even convert them from character to numeric. We did all of that. And now this third part, as I'm saying, has to do with how we can use the quote argument as well as the stringsAsFactors argument in read.csv or read.table functions when we are reading data into R. Why is this so important? That's why I started the tutorial by first of all giving an introduction on strings. What is a string? Once again, let's remind ourselves. We said that a string is simply a character or a group of characters enclosed by matched quotations, that are double quotations or single quotations. Basically, when we are trying to write strings, when we want to enter a numeric entity, like for instance, if I want to write 2, and I write 2 and hit enter, R doesn't give me an error. But if I want to write, let's say, B, which is a character is any letter from A to Z. So if I should write, let's say, B, it gives me an error. If I should write, however, because B cannot be found because B is a character. So if I want to write a character, I have to enclose a character by either single quotations. If I hit enter, it hasn't given me any error. It's able to recognize B, or double quotations. It wouldn't give me any error. So this is how we write. So now a character being enclosed by what we call it, quotations, is what we term as what? A string. We could have boys, which is a group of characters. If I should write boys and hit enter, it gives me an error. However, if I should write boys in single quotations or boys in double quotations, R wouldn't give me an error. I wouldn't repeat that. We've already looked at how to write strings. So the purpose of this video is to apply this basic concept of writing strings into how to use the quote argument. So the quote argument here stands for these quotations here. What that means is that when we read a data set into R, for instance, let me show you a quick example. We have this data set here. Okay, so as you can see, this is actually a data set. Don't really care about what is the content, but we know that, for instance, we have these names of the student. It's in French anyway. I'm bilingual, so sometimes I guess. So this is in French, this name of the student, mathematics, marks in mathematics, marks in French, marks in English, and the validation, the assessment, whether the student has passed or not, valid or not valid. Okay, so if we want to read this data into R, all we have to do is to save it in the form of a CSV format. I've already done that, but in case you don't know how to save a data set from Excel to CSV, you simply click on File, you click on Save As, you click on Desktop, for instance, and then we place it on a desktop. Then you click over here, you write the name of your file, or the name of the file, how do you want to save, the name that you want to give it. You click over here, then you select CSV. So I've already done that, and I wouldn't repeat. For example, if I should select CSV, okay, then I was put it on the desktop, then I write save. See that it's telling me that data, I've already done that, so it's a yes. And this is how we save an Excel file into CSV format, because we cannot import Excel file directly into R, unless we will have to install a package known as read.xl and what have you. But if you don't want to do that, then this is a quick way. We have to save the file into a CSV format. Okay, so let's read this data set into R, and I'll show you something. I will show you how we can apply the concept of writing strings into using the quote format, and the importance of actually using the quote function or the quote argument in read.csv or read.table. All right, but before we proceed, so okay, let me look on the desktop right here. Sorry, if you look right here on the desktop, we have our file here. This is our CSV file. We could repeat the same exercise by saving this file into a text file. So to save it into a tab delimited file or a text file, because when we want to import the data set using the read.table command, we will need a text file and no longer a CSV file. So let's click right here and click on Save As. We can put it on the desktop once again, and this time around we will select what? Text file. So we click on the drop down list and we come and select what? Tab delimited file. This tab delimited file, that's for a text file. So tab delimited file. Okay, let's put it on the desktop. We hit on yes, and the file has been saved. Okay, so after doing this, let's try to read this data set. So we have the two of them here. Let me bring this one close to this place. Okay, so we have, as you can see, this is our CSV file and this is our text file. So we have both here. Now what we are going to do is that we will read one of these, or let's first of all use the CSV command, and I'll show you something. So to import our data set into R using the CSV command, what do? We use the read.csv function. So we will use, let's name the data set, for instance, data. So let me name it data. We say data is equal to read.csv. Please note something important here. In case your Excel format, please note that we also have what we term as CSV2. CSV2 is for a semicolon delimited file, whereas CSV classic, which is CSV, just normal CSV, is for a common delimited file. But that depends. When you are using the English version of Excel, usually by default you obtain the CSV file, but in case you are using a French version, when you save your file, it will be in the form of a semicolon delimited file, so you would have to use CSV2. In my case, I'm using the English version, so I would use CSV classic to read my data into R. Okay, so all I have to do is simply select CSV, and then I'll write into quotations. I'll go to the desktop and copy the file path of our CSV file and paste it here. So let's go to our desktop. On our desktop, this is our CSV file right here. As you can see, this is our CSV file. So I'll simply right click on it and then click on properties. When I click on properties, I click on security, and we have the full file extension here, or the full file path. So you simply right click on it, select it, all of it, and right click on it and click on copy. Now we simply come to our R or Rstudio, and then we paste it here as I explained. So we paste it, Control V, or you right click. You can right click or just write Control V to paste it. Okay, and now what are we going to do? After pasting it, R doesn't work with backslash, so you have to put /. Okay, after we are done with this, all we simply have to do is to select this and then execute. So we click on run. Okay, so when we click on execute, what happens? R hasn't given us any error, as you can see on the console, so our data is well imported. Okay, and now let's print our data set, and let me show you something quickly. Print. So print data. If I should print the data set, let's see, we now have our data set right here in front of us. So as you can see, we have the name of the students, and then the mathematics, physics, whatever, English, and then the validation. So right now, when we talk of strings, as I was explaining to you, in your opinion, when you look at each variable and the responses, which of these contains strings? Which of these variables contains strings in our data set that we've imported? So you realize that name of the student, which is a string, because these are words, but these are numeric, and these are also words, so these are also strings. So by default, let me show you something. By default, if I should say use the question mark, for instance, use question mark or help command and write read.csv. If you hit enter, see what happens. Just write read.csv, use the help command, or you write question mark read.csv. If you hit enter and you come to the help menu here, let's see what is there. In the help menu, you'd realize that, okay, watch here. In the help menu, what can we see? We have all the arguments here. So you realize that for the read.csv command, by default, the quotes is equal to this. So what that means is that all the strings, all strings will be quoted using this. That is all responses, or if you want, of the variables, or if you want, all characters within your data set will be quoted using double quotations. This is the symbol for double quotations. In the read.table, it's actually so when you see this symbol, it stands for double quotations. When you see in the read.table, it's rather this way. So for the read.table, it includes both double and single quotations. That's why we have this single quotation here. But for read.table, the quotations for characters is going to be simply double quotations. All right. So with that being said, I think we are done. Now let's move back to our data set and see something. Okay, so what that means is that when we read our data into R, all these, R recognizes them as what? Characters. By default, it's supposed to recognize them either as characters or factors, because a string is a character and string. So for instance, if you want to know the structure of our data set, all we have to do is to use the str command. So if I should say str into brackets data and execute this, let's see what it gives us. Okay, as I was saying, watch here. So you see that all the characters or the strings are considered as what? All the strings or the characters, like names of the students, R has recognized them as characters. However, numeric data remains numeric, and then also, validation, yes or no, that one too is recognized as what? A character. And you see that they are in quotation, double quotations, as I was telling you. So these are strings. You see, these are strings. Okay, so far you would ask me, why are we doing all this? First of all, when is it important to set the quotes, and when is it not important to set the quote? That's the real question that we should be asking ourselves, because you realize that by default, when I imported my data set, I didn't set any string, or I didn't set any quote. I didn't ask R to use, let's say, double quotations or single quotations or anything. I just ignored it and imported my data set. So now I will tell you why is it important sometimes to set the quote. It's often important to set the quote when you have, let's say, when you have quotations within your data set. Remember that we said quotations are used to enter strings, and as I've shown in our data set, when we imported our data set, all the characters are recognized as strings, and you can see that they are in quotations. So these are strings. So the issue is that when we are entering data or when we are importing data into R, sometimes our data set may contain existing quotations, and this gives us a very big problem. In case you haven't watched my first video, you can go and look at that. When let me show you a quick something very quick. When the data set contains quotations already, for instance, let's come back to Excel. So right here in Excel, let's assume that for instance, let's assume that the name, this particular name, is in quotations. Okay, let's assume that this particular name is in quotations. So you have, instead of Marie as it is, you have maybe Marie in quotations this way. If you have Marie in quotations, usually when you are importing data sets, let's say using the read.csv command, read.csv doesn't really care about some of these things. I can assure you that when you are using, for example, if Marie is in quotations, that one wouldn't give us an error, because read.csv is programmed, as I showed you, is programmed to recognize all double strings as what? To recognize all strings or all characters as, or to quote them, to quote all characters as strings using what? Double quotes, as I showed you earlier on, using the help command. So if I should save this, Control S and save this, and I try importing using read.csv command, it wouldn't give me any error. Let's quickly do that. So if I should read the data once again, it hasn't given me an error. If I should print the data, but you see that right now, okay, sorry for that. I think I made a mistake. What I've done is actually going to affect the text file. So if I want the CSV file, sorry for that. Let me change this once again, because the final version that I saved was the text file and not the CSV file. So if I want to, let's save this in the form of CSV file. Click on desktop, we click on this and we select CSV here. Okay, so CSV, where is CSV? Okay, comma delimited file, that's okay. Now let's save it. I've already, okay, yes and yes. Okay, now that we've saved this CSV file, let's try to read it. What did we do first of all? Okay, now what we are going to do is that let's try to encode, let's say Marie with, as I was saying, let's encode Marie with double quotations, or let's assume double quotations existed in our, it's not only double quotation, remember it could be apostrophe here would be, R would recognize apostrophe as a single quotation, and it could be double quotation, it could be single quotation in your data set, and this can give you a lot of headache when you are importing data using read.table. But for read.csv, because it has already been programmed to use double quotations to quote all strings, then that one has no problem. So if I should save this particular data set in the form of CSV format, as we've already done, and now if I should try importing this particular data set once again in our R, let me execute. See that it hasn't given us any error. If I should say print data, you see that, watch here please, you realize that Marie has been imported without any problem. You see, Marie has been imported without any problem. Why? Because when I showed you the help command, when I entered help here, if you write question mark and then read.csv, if you hit enter and you come over here, let's see what R says about read.csv. As I explained to you, read.csv uses what? The quotations for strings is double quotations. So it has been programmed to use double quotations, and so whatever that you have, let's say that has to do with quotations, it doesn't really care. However, read.table has both. When you look at read.table, which is here, it uses both double quotations and single quotations. So what that means is that read.table can either use double quotations. Sorry for the interruption. Read.table can either use double quotations or both of them. It uses both of them. So what that means is if in your data set you have, for instance, apostrophe or you have quotations existing in your data set, read.table gets confused. Like which one is it going to, right now that it was because it has not been programmed to use a particular single quotation, it has both. So when you have existing quotations, be it apostrophe here would serve as a single quotation, or if you have existing double quotations in your data set, then when you are using read.table, you will have to set the quote, or you have to simply remove the quotes. So let me show you how to do that, so that you would appreciate what we are doing. So this is, but also remember that when you are importing CSV file, in case your data set has, let's say, comma in the, what do you call it? Let me show you an example. In case your data set has, let's say, in case within your data set, the titles of your variables contains comma, there's also another headache. This is complicated, but I think I have to just look at it. We have to tackle the example for things to be clear. So now let me show you what I'm trying to say is that, okay, all right, so let's first of all remain with our CSV file, and I'll tell you the importance. Like I told you, when you are using read.csv or read.csv2, there is no problem with quotations. You see, but the headache is that, and so since there are no problems with quotations, there's no any need even removing the quotations. But sometimes, for one reason or the other, but sometimes it also depends. When you have a very large data set and you have quotations existing in it, it can still cause problems. Sometimes you import the data set, and when you use the dimension command, you realize that part of the data set has been, the dimension has reduced because R has fused certain rows together because of the presence of quotations in your data set or apostrophes. But the importance, one thing that we have to note is that the quotations being set by default in the read.csv command, the fact that the quotations is being set by default to double quotations actually helps us prevent your data set from splitting. Let me zoom for you to see what I'm talking about. The fact that in your read.csv command, let's say the quotations have been preset to double quotations, actually helps you from preventing a string or a variable that contains comma in the variable name from splitting. Let me show you a quick example of this. So what we are going to do is that let's come to our data set. Let's assume that, for instance, your name is like this. The name of the student, let's assume, is something like this. It's name, comma, okay. Sometimes it happens. For instance, you may have your data set in the form of something like this. And what that means is that the quotes that are existing actually prevents this string here, which is names, from splitting when you are reading it into R using the read.csv command. Let me show you how. Let's save this data set into CSV format. And this time around, we call it, let's say, tutor1, because I just want to differentiate. So I'll call it tutor1, okay? And we save it as CSV format. Let me hit OK. Now, let's try to read tutor1 into R. I'll simply copy this file extension and change the name so that I wouldn't waste time. So just copy it. Okay. So let's paste it here so that I can explain what I'm trying to explain. And now we'll change the name to tutor1. Okay. So this time around, we've saved the CSV file and we are calling it tutor1. So just add 1 here and we are through to go. So I can select this and execute. When I execute, let's print our data and see what happens. So let's print the data. Okay, after printing the data, let's see what happens. You see that we have the name of our variable here with OK here. You see, name OK. R hasn't given us any error. It has been able to recognize, to import, to import this string without any issue. You see it. But now, even though we kept comma, okay, this variable has been imported without any problem. It simply replaced the comma by dot. This is what it does for the titles. When you have commas in the names of your header or your header parameters or the names of your variables, it puts dot to replace the comma. But read.csv is able to do this. Why? Simply because we have it has been set to use double quotations. You see, so but now let's assume that like I remove the quotations. So let's come back here to our read.csv, our tutor one that we are trying to import. Let me come down here, and then I'll write comma, and then I'll write quote is equal to, usually when you want to set the quote, when we want to remove the quote, we put double quotations like this. Do you see it? But in case we want to use let's say double quotations, then you have to go to, if you want to use double, this is when you put double quotations, what that means is that R is going to ignore all quotes within your data set. So be it apostrophe, be it double quotes, be it single quotes well closed, it's going to ignore all these problems. So you have cancelled, you have all quotes in, like, from your data set. But now when you do this, what happens? And you import the data set, in case you have a CSV file and then you decide to off the quote, by default, let me show you something here. By default, when you look at read.csv, when you look at the help menu, what happens? I told you that read.csv is double quotes. Here it is. You see it. By default, it's double quote. This is a symbol for double quote. This is how it's written. Whereas read.table is the two of them is double quote and single quote or apostrophe. So I hope my explanation is clear. Now, with the help of these double quotes, it actually prevents the data from splitting. When you have, let's say, within the name of a particular string or variable has comma, these quotes actually prevent the data from splitting. So you see that when I imported data using read.csv command, the string did not split. But this time around, let's remove the quote. To actually remove the quote, you have to what? To put double quotations. So it will no longer, when you put double quotations, it means you have changed this default from the double quotations. This is how the double quotations for a string is supposed to be written. But when you change it to simply something like this, let me show you. Let me show you the quote argument here, and you see what I'm talking about. When you set quote is equal to this, what that means is that R is going to what? To disable quoting altogether. So if I should disable the quoting altogether, see what happens. So I've done that. I've disabled the quote altogether. Let's execute this once again and print our data set and see what will happen. It hasn't given us any error, but right now let's print the data and see. Okay, see what has happened. Watch here carefully. You realize that this thing has the string or the name of this variable, which was name comma okay, is now split into two, or has been splitted into two. Watch carefully what has happened. You see, it has been splitted into two. Sorry, as you can see, name here, and because it has been splitted into two, R was forced to create an invalid variable, because when it was splitted into two, this was actually names comma okay. In the previous data set, as you can see, it was names okay here. But when we decide to set the quotes to ignore all quotes, what for the interruption? When we decide to ignore all quotes, what happened? R has actually splitted the data. In the previously, when I just left it default, so it used the double quotations to encode all the strings, it didn't give us any problem. Now that I've decided to remove the quotes, look at what has happened. It has splitted the data into two, or this particular string, which is names comma okay, is now splitted into two. So the name, the none here stands for the names, and the okay has been shifted to take the place of the what we call it, the place of mathematics. Marks for mathematics. Marks for mathematics has taken the place of marks for physics. Marks for physics has taken the place of marks for French. Marks for French has taken the place of marks for English, and marks for English has now taken the place of the validation, this categorical variable. And now this categorical variable is left with no data. So this is what you can have when you so this why you are not supposed to off it. That's why have I explained this? I've just explained this to you to tell you that, you know what, read.csv command is very good, because by default, with the help of the double quotations, when you are using it, it has no problem in reading what do you call it, data that is in a form of that has quotations. We read the data using Marie, and Marie was in quotations. It could be something that has apostrophe, for instance, Marie's book, if that was the name of this particular response here. The apostrophe is a single quotation, will be considered as a single quotation, and it can also give us problems. But when you are using read.csv, it doesn't really care about some of these things. Unless you have a very large data set, you can have some problems. And in case you have very large data set, then in that case, you will have to set the quotations to something else. You have to, over here, let me come. In case you have a very large data set, you will have to set the quotations to be, you have to specify. So you have to, by default, it's just using the double quotations. And if you have a very large data set, what I would advise is that make sure you delete your apostrophes and quotations existing in the data set, because with very large data set, read.csv can also give you problems. But for very small data set, even if you have quotations in it, it doesn't really cause any headache. But in case you are, another solution to deal with this problem of quotations is to off the data set. Is to off the quotations. Let me put in my own terms by simply putting this. But when you put this, you have to also be careful, because when you put this, then you have to make sure that in the headers or the titles of your variables, there should not be any variable with comma, because when you have comma in it and then you have a very large data set and you don't want to have problems with apostrophe and quotations, so you decide to cancel the quotations by putting this sign. What happens is that when you set your quotation to be equal to this, then what that means is that any variable at all that has comma in its name, or any string that has comma in its name, will be splitted, as we have seen here. So I repeat once again, with large data set, all you have to do is what? To delete the apostrophes, some of these apostrophes. Or you could remove you could put quotations, you could put double quotations like this to cancel the effect of all quotations, because I showed you that by the default way of writing quotations is like this. It's the default way of writing quotations is like this in read.csv. It's of double quotations is like this. So when you put single quote, when you just write it as we have done here, then what that means is that you have just canceled the effect of these double quotations. And when you do this with a very large data set, you might have to do this in order to if you have apostrophe or quotations existing in your data, you might have to cancel the quotations. But now when you cancel the quotations, make sure that none of your variables has comma in it. When there is a string in your variable with comma, let's say names comma okay, as I've shown you, then it will be splitted into two. I hope my explanation is clear. So this is the importance of what? Setting the quotes in read.csv. Let's move on to read.table quickly. There's no time. And then okay, So with read.table, let's move on quickly. So with read.table, let's try to import our data set once again. So to import the data set, we use data, for instance, once again, and then I will say read.table. So right now we are going to import a text file, and already I've saved our tutor. Our tutor was saved in the form of a text file before all these modifications. So let's go back to our desktop, and we have our tutor that we saved earlier on as a text file here. Okay, so let's assume we want to import this tutor here. We right click on it, click on properties, then we click on security, and then we copy our file extension, our txt file. So we simply copy it, Control C, or you right click and copy the file extension. Now let's go to the desktop. I said the desktop, to our R, then we'll put quotations and paste it here, and we do as usual, we cancel this, put it as forward, forward, and forward. And we have to, we have to add a header. So we say header is equal to true, so that R will be able to recognize that the first row contains the names of our variables. So we say header is equal to true. In read.csv, by default, header is equal to true, so we didn't have to put it. But in read.table, header is equal to false, so we have to put it to be true. Header is equal to true. Okay, now let's read this data set into R, and I'll show you something. Okay, R has imported the data. Let's print the data once again. Print data. And we have our data set here. Remember when I saved the CSV file at that time, when I saved the file into, when I first saved the file into text format, I hadn't yet kept all these modifications. So the data was just like this. Let me go back to how it was. It was like this. Mary was not in quotations. So that's why R has imported the data very well. This is how the data set was. So now let's try to import this data. So you see that this is how the data was when I saved into text file, and that's why this is the same data set that has now been imported here without any problem. So we have it here. Everything is perfect. But now let's assume that we put double quotations in it. Somewhere, maybe let's just put double quotations to Mary, something like this. For whatever reason, we've kept double quotations there. For single quotations and apostrophes, sometimes it might not give you much of a headache. Okay, let's start with single quotations. So let's put single quotations. So let me zoom for you to see properly. Okay, so let's say let's say Marie's son. Okay, if I should say Marie's son instead of Marie as the name of the person. So this time when I said Marie's son is, there's apostrophe there, and this apostrophe in R can be cause a lot of problems. Also, mind you, when reading data into R using the read.table command, you have to make sure that your data set has no spaces in it. You have to make sure that your responses have no spaces in it. So let me show you something. Before we even talk about this, let me cancel this. Let me just write Marie's son, okay? And then let me put space here. When you are using the read.table command, make sure that the modalities or the responses of your variables have no spaces in them. Let me show you this. So let's save this back into tutor in the form of a text file, and I'll show you what I want to show you. tutor. So let's assume I'll just replace what was existing there. So I'll just put tutor here. So I'll just put tutor here, and I'll save it as a text file. Where's txt tab delimited text txt txt. Oh wow, text. Okay, tab delimited. It's okay. Let's put it on the desktop. Okay, so now we have it this way, and I just wrote Marie-san. So I'm just trying to this a bonus that I'm giving you, that when you are using read.table, be careful. That's why it's always good to use read.csv. Read.csv tolerates all these problems. But when you are using read.table and you have one of your responses or modalities of a particular string or variable, you have space in it, it will give you an error. So let's try importing. Let's go back here and try reading our data set once again and see what happens. You see, it has given me an error here. Why? Simply because of the space that I kept in the, I just wrote Marie-san. So if I want to prevent this particular problem, here I have to, instead of saying Marie-san with a space, because of this space, I press the space bar, and that's why this problem is happening. So if anytime you want to write something that it has to with spaces like this, using the when you are using read.table, you have to make sure that you put read.csv actually tolerates this. You have to put you can use underscore to prevent this. So if I should put underscore, for instance, and I hit save it, I save it once again, I just save it by pressing Control S, and I say yes. So I've saved it again. Now let's go back to our and execute it once again. You see that it hasn't given me an error because the space is no longer there. So this was just a bonus. And if I should print the data set, you have your data here. Okay, now let's come back to the objective of what we are doing. Now let's assume that in this particular data set, we decide to put apostrophe somewhere. When we put apostrophe, like apostrophe, I told you that read.csv has no problems with apostrophe or quotations, with single or double quotations. However, read.table can actually give us a lot of headache. So let's say if we have, let's say, instead of John, let's say John's or John's son. Okay, and I said because of the space problem, we can put hyphen here to prevent any problem. Okay, so let's save this particular data set. Yes. Okay, and now after saving it, let's try to read it once again into R and see what happens. Using the read.table command, let's execute and see. R wouldn't give me an error. That's just to tell you that apostrophe is not really a very big problem when it comes to R. See that the data set, using the read.table command, the data set has been imported without any headache. And you can see John's son here with the apostrophe, no problem. But I told you that with the space, in order to prevent the problem of space, we decided to use hyphen here. So this is perfect. But let's assume we use double quotations somewhere. But also note that when you have large data set, even apostrophes can give you problems. So let's assume that we have large data set. Let's see what happens when we have let's assume we have quotations, double quotations somewhere. So if we should put double quotations at Nina, for instance, so Nina will put double quotations here, and so Nina, for instance, is enclosed with double quotations. This is just to tell you that with double quotations, R gives us problems. So let's assume Nina in double quotations like this. Let's save it once again, Control S, and we say yes and save the data. Let's try to read it using the read. You see that earlier on when we had Marie in double quotations and we used the read.csv command to import it, there wasn't any problem. But let's do the same thing. Now we have Nina in double quotations. Let's use the read.table command and see what will happen. So with the read.table, if we should execute this data, let's see what happens. R has given us an error. But when we used read.csv, we never had an error. So how do we prevent this problem with read.table? To prevent this problem, so what I'm trying to tell you is that when you have your data set and you have apostrophes in it, or you have double quotations in it, or you have even single quotations in it, read.table can actually give you a lot of headache. And to prevent this particular problem, all we have to do is to cancel all the quotations. And to do that, we can repeat the same exercise as I showed you earlier on. So what all we have to do is that we have to come and click right here. We come and click on, we have to come over here, then we write comma, and then we use the quote argument. We set the quote argument to be equal to, then we put double quotations. I explained to you that, I explained to you earlier on that read.table actually uses both double and single quotations to represent the strings. All characters are usually quoted with double and single quotations by default. I mean, it can use either double quotations or single quotations, or both of them. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas read.csv uses double quotations, only double quotations. So read.csv, because it uses just double quotations, it doesn't really care. Even if you have double quotations existing in it, it has been programmed to use double quotations. However, read.csv, because it has these problems here, when you have quotations existing in it, be it double quotations or single quotations, it doesn't really know which one to use because it has the two. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say, let's come to the console and let me show you something quickly. When I wouldn't repeat because I've already done this in the first part of our tutorial on how to write strings. I've explained that when we are writing strings and we want to quote, we want to write strings. For instance, let's say boys. If we want to say boys playground, okay, so we write boys in this way, boys playground. Okay, let me just make things easier. Let's assume we have boys in single quotations, boys. Let's assume we have boys, or let me use letters. I wouldn't want to use big characters. So I explained that when we want to quote strings that contain, for instance, let's assume we have A here. A here gives us an error because A is supposed to be written as a string. So we write quotations A, it hasn't given us an error. But in case we want to quote A as a string and A is already in quotations, if A is already enclosed in double quotations, for example, if I should write, then I have to use single quotations to quote A in double quotations. So I have to use single quotations like this, and then I can write what? A in double quotations this way. Sorry. See, it hasn't given me an error. In the same way, if I have A in single quotations already, for instance, if I should write A in single quotations, this is a string. Now, if I want to quote A and A is already having apostrophe or single quotation, then I have to use double quotations to enclose it. So I have to use, let's say, double quotations. Then I can now write single quotation A, single quotation. If I want to quote, you see, this is how it works. So if you have understood this principle, it's the same thing that happens. What that means is that when you are using read.table command, read.csv command, because read.csv has been programmed to use only double quotations, it doesn't really care, because if you have, let's say, if your data set, for instance, contains but okay, let me show you something. Let's assume I use double quotations. Okay, let's use double quotations. Sorry, let's assume I use double quotations to quote something that is already in double quotations. So let's say B here, double quotation, something like this. If I should hit enter, it will give me an error. I told you that when you want to copy a string that already has double quotations, you have to use what? Single quotations. when you want to copy, or I mean to quote a string that has single quotations in it already, you have to... Okay, so you see that it has given us an error. So what that happens is that, but because read.table, I mean read.csv has been programmed to use double quotations, it doesn't really care, because it doesn't really care about the quotations unless you have a very large data set. It can give you some of these errors. But now with the read.table command, it gets confused, because for instance, if you already have single quotations in it, and by default it has been programmed to use double quotations or single quotations to mark or to quote strings, because it has been programmed to use either of them. Right now, when you have if in your data set you already have apostrophes, or you already have, when it will consider apostrophes as single quotations, or if you have double quotations, then it will consider them as double quotations, and it will now be confused. Which one is it going to use to enclose your string? Because the rule is that if you already have quotations, single quotations, then I should use double quotations. But right now, it has been programmed to use both. So which one will it use? So it will give you an error. That's why when we tried importing the data set, and then without setting the quotations, so let me cancel this. Without setting the quotations to be, okay, so let's assume that our data set is just like this. So without setting the quotations to be equal to without canceling the effect of the quotations, when we watch here, when we enclose Nina with double quotations, it R gave us an error, because according to the strings rule, R, in case of double quotations like this in the data set, is supposed to use single quotations. But read.table has been programmed to use either single or both of them at the same time. So now when in case it has something like this, it wouldn't know, should I use double quotations? Should it use double quotations? It will be an error. By default, it uses double quotations, so it gives us an error. I hope my explanation is clear. So to prevent this problem, when you have double quotations, I told you that even with apostrophe and single quotations, it can give you a similar problem in large data. But when the data is set is small, when you have double quotations, that's what you would often give you these errors. And to prevent this problem, what do you have to do? All you have to do is to cancel the quotations. Just use this. Let me show you once again. All you have to do is to cancel everything, to cancel the effect of the quotations by the argument. When you come to quote here, okay, so you have to simply use what? Set the quote to be this, to make sure that you disable quoting altogether. And that's what we are going to do here. So like I explained, all we have to do here is to come and write comma, and then we say quote is actually equal to what? Then we put double quotations here. And if I should execute, what happens? You see that R hasn't given us an error now. And if I should print the data set, see that our data set has been imported without any problem. But because Nina was already in quotations, since I decided to cancel the quotations, it had to quote only Nina as a string, because by default I told you that it uses what? Double quotations. So double quotations, using double quotations to quote double quotations, normally was supposed to give us an error, but since we decided to cancel all or disable all the quotes, or disable quotes altogether, then it had to succumb to our demand, so simply because we kept this here. So to resume things, in case you have double quotations existing in your data set, or apostrophe or whatever, to prevent any problem, simply set quote is equal to what? This. and it will help prevent problems when you are reading data into R using the read.table command. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope my explanation was clear. In case you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask and I will respond to you. I know the tutorial was long, but it's worth it. In the last part of our tutorial, we shall be looking at how to set the stringsAsFactors argument. So you can look right below in the description box and you shall find a video to how to set the stringsAsFactors argument in when using read.table or read.csv command to read data into R. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe.